The Final Shape has finally arrived in Destiny 2, which brings the new Prismatic Subclass, and I'm not gonna lie, it's OP. I managed to take not one, not two, but three of my favourite and most powerful melee builds in the game, and combine the power of all three builds into one. Not only we're gonna be insta-killing everything with infinite melee abilities, giving us a ton of benefits, but we're also gonna be empowering our Transcendance, which I'm not kidding, makes you an actual unkillable god. You'll be tanking everything while massively increasing your melee's damage to a whole new scale. We're going to get faster supers, have a damage buff from multiple sources, a resistance buff from multiple sources, we're going to get infinite and faster abilities, we'll have the ability to suspend enemies, we'll have Radiant, Woven Mail, and be amplified consistently, which will all contribute to the smooth gameplay loop that makes this build what it is, and it's insane. And you know what my favourite part about this build is that we'll get our supers so quickly, which we'll use to instantly fill up our Dark Transcendance meter. So the only thing we'll have to do is fill up the light one by just using the build the way it is, by just getting pretty much any kills. The entire build is designed to be a fast-paced ability build, where you're always moving around quickly while having that huge damage resistance, to primarily make our Transcendance as powerful as possible. In fact, what's funny is being Transcendent on this build is more powerful than the majority of supers we use combined, because the whole purpose is to deal insane damage with our melee slam while Transcendent. But at the same time, we're extending Transcendence on every single kill, and since we're a quick add clear and DPS melee build, extending that timer shouldn't be an issue. And honestly, if you kept having adds around all the time, I think you could be in Transcendence indefinitely. I mean, just look at that Transcendence bar, it just keeps going back up, it's wild. It's almost as powerful as my sponsor CD Keys, where you can buy games up to 90% off and get your hands on some of the best deals of releases this year, like the Final Shape expansion, Elden Ring, and even get Xbox Game Pass cheaper too. As a regular customer myself, I find that CD Keys is the best go-to site when it comes to buying games cheaper and making the most out of my money. In fact, they're so good that they have an excellent rating with over 160,000 reviews on Trustpilot, and with just a few simple clicks, you could be playing your next favourite dream game. Go check them out, link below. Now, I've seen some powerful builds in my time, but if the Final Shape has taught me one thing, it's that Prismatic really can take build crafting to the next level, because there's just a ton of different combinations you can use to make any build possible. Which is why over the next few months, I will be covering a ton of new and updated builds for Destiny 2 The Final Shape and Episode 1 Echoes, and you can find that entire new build playlist down below, which will start to fill up with some new fun and insane builds soon, so be sure to check it out when you get a moment, because you might just find your new dream build in there. I am also now partnered with Mobilix 2, so you can find my builds over there as well. Now with this new Titan Prismatic build, we're going to focus on making our melee as powerful as possible by taking advantage of the Transcendence. Because by being Transcendent, we'll increase our abilities regeneration, have increased weapon damage and damage resistance against enemies, but also by getting kills, we'll extend the timer of that Transcendence buff. So it's like having any normal build, except we're getting a few extra things on top. Now, since we can use two aspects from completely different subclasses, I've chosen to go with the Consecration and the Knockout, because with Consecration, while sliding, then meleeing, and then meleeing again in the air, we'll do a powerful slam that does a ton of damage. But we'll only use this when we are Transcendent most of the time, because we will want to use our original melee to build up the Transcendence to begin with. So with our original melee, we're going to use the Thunderclap Arc melee, where holding the melee and releasing will unleash a devastating blast in front of you, and the longer you charge it, the more damage you'll do. 9 times out of 10, you'll just run around and tap the melee rather than charging it, as we're only really using this on minor enemies to build up the light Transcendence bar. We will be using the Skullfort Titan Exotic Helmet, because what this does is trigger health regeneration and restore melee energy when getting kills with arc melees. And this works really well with the Thunderclap, because as long as you're getting final blows, you'll instantly get that melee straight back. Just be careful if using this on tougher enemies, because you might lose it and you will have to wait for it to recharge. So you might want to use some mods to help you get it back faster if you run into that issue on a regular basis. If you're going to use the melee on a boss, you may as well just go for the slam instead. It's fine if you're using them while Transcendent, because you'll get them back quickly anyway. Now, by using the Knockout aspect, defeating enemies with melee attacks will make us amplified and restore a portion of our health, as well as increasing our melee's range and damage. Now this is important for 3 main reasons. The first is because we want that extra DPS buff with the melee, the second is for getting the health on kills, which helps for survivability, and the third is because we need a light subclass buff, which is going to be the amplified by getting a melee kill. The reason you want the amplified buff is because of our first fragment, Facet of Sacrifice, where while we have an arc buff, that being the amplified, we'll get bonus darkness transcendence energy. We want this so that we can fill up the darkness meter faster to become transcendent, because the only ways for us to do that right now with this build is to get kills with a darkness ability, which the only one that we're using is a shackle grenade, but we'll use this to suspend enemies. Or we can just fill it up with things like a kinetic weapon. But the main way we'll rapidly fill up that bar is actually by using our super, which is going to be the Blade Fury Strand one. It's important you use this super because by using the Strand super, we'll get bonus light transcendence energy with the Facet of Devotion fragment. But the main reason you want a Strand super on is because of the Facet of Purpose fragment. Picking up an Orb of Power will grant Wither Mail, which is going to give us a damage resistance buff, and also chain towards a bunch of other things. Now, don't let this confuse you, so if you need to rewind this video to understand it clearer, you can do that. But I am going to point this out here, that we now have a way to get Wither Mail through picking up orbs because we're using a Strand super, and we're getting amplified because we're using the knockout aspect and getting a melee kill. Now we're actually also getting Radiant too because of this artifact perk, Radiant Orbs, where picking up an Orb of Power makes you Radiant while you have a Prismatic subclass equipped. Now let that sink in for a second. We have Radiant, Amplified and Woven Mail. Radiant is giving us a DPS increase, Amplified is giving us faster movement speed, and Woven Mail is giving us damage resistance. Now as I said, because of these 3 buffs being active, it will trigger both Facet of Sacrifice and Facet of Devotion, which are going to help us get the Transcendence quicker. And this is important because being Transcendent is our main part of the build for our big DPS buff, and that's primarily due to the artifact, which I don't want to touch on just yet because this is where things get a bit more advanced. Now first, we need to understand the gameplay loop of this build. So the way you'll use the build is you'll start by generating an orb and then picking it up. That can be either through your Cypher mods or your melee. Picking up the orb will give us Woven Mail and Radiant just like that, and melee kills will give us the amplified buff. So as long as you're running around producing orbs regularly, you'll have these 3 buffs active all the time, which is going to help you fill up that transcendent meter faster for the light side, the left side. As for the dark side, the right side, you'll fill this up with kinetic weapons or your Strand super. The super is the fastest way to do this, which is also part of the reason why you want to use a darkness super being Strand as well. Now in order for us to get that super faster to be able to keep up with the consistency of the build, we'll want to run 2 hands-on mods in the helmet so that we're getting bonus super energy on melee kills. Since we're always getting melee kills, we're going to get that super a lot faster. But we're also going to use a Cypher mod for the main weapon. For me that's using a Sunshot, which is also going to help fill up the light meter. And then in the arms, you want to use a heavy-handed mod to produce orbs from melee final blows. This does have a cooldown, but when you look at the amount of orbs being made just in general as you play, and even if you play with others, you shouldn't really have a problem keeping all the buffs up all the time. Eventually, your Transcendence will be ready to use, and you will want to activate it when you either have a lot of ads around, or you just want to deal some damage to ground units like a boss. Because instead of using the arc melee, what you'll now do is slide melee, jump melee to do a big slam. But before doing this, you need to ideally make sure you have all 3 buffs active, which is the Radiant, Amplified and Woven Mail, before you do go in for that slam. But by just running around slamming everything anyway, you're probably going to make those orbs for those buffs, and then you'll also refund Transcendence energy afterwards, and also extend it as well overall, so it is pretty wild. Now before I touch on the last few prismatic fragments, we need to understand what's going on in the artifact, because this is buffing our damage. The only perks you really need to care about are the Radiant Orbs to get Radiant when picking up Orbs of Power, the Galvanic Armor so that when we're amplified we get more damage resistance when using a Prismatic subclass, the Shield Crush so while we have Woven Mail we deal more melee damage and it will recharge faster, and while amplified or Radiant we'll get the same effect but with our grenades. So just make sure you have these buffs active before going in for any DPS melee slams when in Transcendence mode. And the last perk is Transference, so that we get even more damage to those abilities but while Transcendent. And Weapon Final Blows while Transcendent Transcendant, refund the light and dark energy afterwards. Really strong bunch of perks that you definitely need to use with this build to make it the most effective. As for the last 2 fragments, you want the Justice, so that our ability final blows explode when in Transcendance, and Protection, so that while surrounded we are more resilient to incoming damage, and that buff is even stronger when in Transcendance mode. Now I will have this build up over on Mobalytics if you do want to check it out there, but there will be also a dim link down below if you prefer to use that. Since this is the first prismatic build I've made so far, I will be looking at making a ton of other fun and crazy builds over the coming weeks, once I have tested out a load of different combinations to see what works best. But so far this one has been really good, and it is stupidly fun in PvE. So guys, I strongly recommend you give this one a try and let me know what builds you're running down below. Otherwise, I've been Divide, make sure to check out the playlist down below for new builds, and until then, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.